Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy that I can welcome you here at the Institute of Communication Studies and Journalism at the Faculty of Social Sciences. And it is the first English session of our regular debates about the Czech media and not only Czech media. And as you know from the website, Facebook or the poster, we will talk about various topics, the reputation of the Czech media and the Czech journalism, also the Czech local topics that could be interesting for foreign reporters, and the foreign public, comparisons between Czech journalism and the foreign journalism, and of course also about the need of professional journalists organization. It is quite a hot topic when we are discussing the Czech syndicate, so it is really important to have here our foreign guest, who is the president of the European Federation of Journalists. It's our first guest. It's MOGENS BLICHER. Hello. Then we have here Jan Lopatka, the chief correspondent for Czech Republic and Slovakia from Thomson Reuters.
Hello, good afternoon.
And also ERIK Best, editor-in-chief and the publisher of the Fleet Sheet. Welcome.
Good evening.
We will start with the two presentations. The first one is about the kind of generational perspective of students and a kind of mobilization of youth. So I hope we will be mobilized by that. And also we will challenge Mogens, because Mogens said that he would be really happy if you would challenge him. So don't be hesitating. And let's start with the first presentation. Yes, we will see that there. We will see them there. And you can use the mouse here. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you would prefer to sit there, of course, and not
Hello,
to turn
everybody, and thank you for. Do I need this one?
Yes.
Or can I?
Yes, because we have also the YouTube streaming. So
Okay.
for that.
So, and it's function here. Okay. Hello, everybody, and I would say I'm really pleased to be here, and as our moderator said, I like to be challenged. One of the best sessions that I am in is when I am meeting students, because you are the future of our profession, and often you know more about new media. And when I talk about new media, I'm not talking about the internet. I don't really know what is the new media now. Actually, I'm getting tired of listening to people saying that the internet is new media. All my children, they have grown up with the internet. For them, this is not new media. And for you, I suppose it's not new media at all. It's the more traditional media. But you know much more about what is happening right now out there. So it's always interesting. As said, I'm president of the European Federation of Journalists, and we have affiliates in most of the European countries. I think it's only Moldova is the only country now where we don't have any affiliates. But then we have in all across Europe we have more than 60 affiliates, and so we are in touch with journalism all around our continent, and with all the progresses and all the obstacles and all the not only challenges but also attacks and violations on press freedom and journalism. So, but just to say that it's a broad thing that we are talking about. Media is a fundamental pillar of our democracy. I think it's so important always to remind ourselves about this. And to make sure that media is a fundamental pillar, we also have to make sure that and tell everybody that journalism must be independent. Without independent journalism, we won't be able to control what happens in the governments, what our policymakers are doing. We need independent media to do that, and we need investigative journalism, which is really under threat these years. And I'm sure that most of you would really like to be investigative journalists, and this is one of the most difficult work that you can get into, but it's also one of the most important we need international cooperation. We need partnership, cross-border partnership. Today, the media are cross-border. We are in a global society, and we have to remind ourselves about that also. And capacity building is one of the reasons that I should be here to talk about capacity building. But before doing this, I would like to just highlight a few conventions and declarations, because it is a part of our history that after World War II we agreed on, and today I think sometime politicians, they don't know about it, they neglect it, they are talking about now we should look at our conventions again, but it's right now in this time when we are what somebody called in crisis, and we are in crisis. Media and politics are in conflict and in crisis. We should not try to change our conventions, because they are so important. We've got 4, and I will go into 3 of them. Article 19.
Yes.
Yes. Which is the first one of them, the UN Declaration, that everyone has right to freedom of opinion and expression. Remember this, please. Somewhere around the world, this is now challenged. And we can go further. We can have the European Convention, Article 10, freedom of expression, which is used in many cases in Europe when journalism is violated, and you don't get what you want from the courts in your country. Remember, you've got the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and this Article 10 is crucial when we talk about media freedom. We have had situations where this article has changed a decision from a court. I'll just tell you one little story from Denmark, where I'm coming from. We had a story from the airport. A journalist, he showed that he was able to steal a knife in the airport from a restaurant. He went to the gate, and at the gate, he didn't pass the gate. At the gate, he delivered the knife, just to show this is impossible, dear friends, to do this and bring a knife actually on board the airplane. The aircraft. He was jailed because of that. Well, he was brought to police office, and he was not jailed. He was brought to police office and brought to court, and he was sentenced with a fine. He was fined, and because of doing this, because he was not allowed to bear a weapon. We followed this case very closely, and we ended up in the Supreme Court, and in the end of the day, we won the case because of Article 10. I say this very briefly. It's not so simple as I say it, but this is the headline of it, the headline of it. In fact, we won the case, and because of Article 10. So it's crucial to know this article, because you can actually use it if journalism is violated, where journalism is important for the society. It has, you have some extra tools to work with. Article 11. This Article 11 is from the Charter of Fundamental Rights in the EU, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The Charter of Fundamental Rights in the EU is, in some way, has gathered all declarations and conventions concerning human rights and rights for all fundamental rights in Europe. But these articles are quite important as well, because you can see in Article 11 that everyone has the right to freedom of expression, and the freedom and pluralism of the media shall be respected. Actually, EU has made a full report about, in particularly, point 2. So it's serious that we have this right. So every time it's challenged, have in mind that we have international articles, international charters that reflect on this. If you go to Article 12, it's just in addition to this, and this is about capacity building and why it's important that you also, as journalists, organize yourself. Sometimes I think that some countries in Europe, they forget this Article 12, that everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and to freedom of association at all levels, in particular political, trade union, and civic matters. It's a fundamental right to have a trade union. I think we should have this in mind. Okay, I'll go on with the next about independent journalism. I don't think I need to say much about that. I think you know everything about it. That journalism should be impartial. The third headline here, that the state should keep the arm's length principle in regard to public service media. This is what is challenged today in many European countries. In one of your neighbor countries, in Poland, it has been challenged, this arm's length principle, because the politicians, the governments, wanted to influence in public service media by the way they replaced the director and the president of the board of the Polish television, and after that they immediately replaced a number of journalists in the media. So that was really a way to influence on the media. They didn't keep the arm's length principle, and this is a part of actually Article 11 in the European fundamental rights, because there is a right for pluralism, as I showed you before, and media freedom. So, say it really short, politicians should and must stay away from newsrooms. And in the same manner, owners of primary media should also stay away from newsrooms. So when you are in a private newspaper, in a private digital media, or wherever, a private television, the owners of them should not intervene in what happens in the newsroom. Editorial freedom should be absolute. The last sentence here about authors' rights. I don't know how much you have talked about authors' rights, but authors' rights are crucial for you, because it's you used to say that rights and duties go hand in hand. You have the duty to make good journalism, to make reliable journalism. The author's rights help you with that, because when you have the duty, you of course also have the right. It can be the right to be remunerated. It's also the the moral rights that what you have done, what you have made of journalism, that it's not changed without your permission. That they cannot be just misused in some different ways. Again, just also to make a picture of this. You might know that we in Denmark have some cartoonists. You might have heard about that. And we have one who has made a special cartoon with a Muhammad cartoon. I'm sure you have heard about that. And this cartoon was suddenly used in a movie made by Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. This was a misuse of the cartoon, because it was used as an entrance and in the end of the movie. Immediately, we urged Geert Wilders to remove these cartoons. He didn't want to. Then and this is why cross-border is so important. Then we engaged with our Dutch affiliates, the Danish and the Dutch journalist unions, joined their forces and the Dutch union sent their lawyer to Geert Wilders and told him to remove this cartoon now. He did so, and he had also to pay a fine for it to the cartoonists. Of course, it will still be somewhere on the YouTube. I know it's difficult. You cannot just remove these things, but but it was very important to stress, to emphasize that you cannot just misuse a cartoon like this. And we have several cases like this actually, where misuse is. Where we have another case where a politician has used more than 50 articles from newspapers on his own website. He had to remove them all. He also had to pay all the journalists for having had them at the website. This is also what authors' rights is about. Yes, the infrastructure is important. Just sorry, I just need to be here as well. The infrastructure is important. You need strong organizations, both for you as journalists and for the employers, because you have a lot of common interests. You have a common interest when we are talking about media policy, in regard to media policy. We have common interests when it comes to education, mid-career training. To organize that, it's very important. Self-regulatory bodies should be taken care of by editors and journalists in company. I hope this functions now. I don't know what happens here. Sorry for this. Here we are. Yes, we'll just take the next because this is important. The education.
Just one more.
Yeah, education. As journalists, as journalist organizations, and you, and particularly you as students, should seek influence on the educational system. We need strong and good education. You know a lot about that, and should be a part of the way we are seeking influence. And we should connect also what I write here, fundamental education at universities with mid-career training. You will need a lot of mid-career training during your life. We need a lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is so important. I have missed a part of lifelong learning myself. I can be in trouble if I should. I have been president for many years in the Danish Union, away from journalism, from real journalism, making a lot of other things. So today it will be very, very difficult for me to be a strong journalist again. And so I should have taken care of my lifelong learning actually more than I have done. So I know how important it is. International partnership we need it more than ever, and we need partnership. We need to be. No organization can do everything itself. European Federation of Journalists, well, of course we think we are a great organization, but we cannot do anything. We cannot do it by ourselves. We need to cooperate with the European Newspaper Association, with the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, with IPI, International Press Institute, the RSF, Rapporteurs Sans Frontières, etc., etc. We need to cooperate, because it's by cooperation we get the best results, in my opinion. And we have seen, when we talk about investigative journalism, the Panama Papers was an international case, very, very important international case, and showed how newspapers and news media and journalists around the world can work together. And the last slide here is really addressed to you, that you as students to be able to help us and help yourself and the future for all this. You should organize, because when you are organized, you can be very strong. And remember, it's cool to be member of a union, association, or society, or whatever you call it. It's cool to be that, because you get influence, you get power when you are a member of that. It's also fun to be organized. In Denmark, we have 3,000 students in the Danish Union of Journalists, and they have a big award show every year. It's the next biggest award show after the Oscar show. They think so, I think. But I love to attend these shows, and they give awards to the good stories that journalist students have made during their practice, or during their studying, or whatever they have done. So that's a part of that is also fun. It's also you make a lot of fun also besides that it's cool and it's important to be a member. And finally, I can say, do it today. Organize yourself. Then nobody can stop you from doing it. And and you should challenge the organizations here. I know there are two. We have two affiliates here in Czech Republic. Challenge them. Go and tell them that you want influence. You have a fraction in the university of the students. You have a lot to tell. You have a lot to contribute to our organizations. You are the ones who have to deal with this for many years in the future. You are going to lead this media in this country. And you can. The best way to do this is to organize simply. I said this to 100 students in Belgrade last year as well, and I asked them to do it. That was during the morning. You can do it this afternoon, I said to them. And then a lot of you will say, no, I haven't got time. I have my studies to do. I have a lot of other things. There will always be some among you who would like to do things like this. I think you should really consider to have a strong organization for journalist students in Czech Republic, and seek influence in the two organizations here, and tell them how they can make one big, strong union, because I think you are the ones who can tell them that. I can. You can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this intro. It was more about the ideals. I have just couple of practical slides that can maybe add some context how it is with the Czech journalists in the Czech Republic, and their willing to organize and perceive also the influence. So maybe it will be also interesting for you. It's from the Worlds of Journalism study, and I don't want to present you anyhow longer the Worlds of Journalism study. It's the project, the comparative project of the state of journalism within many European and world countries all around the world. The countries all around the world. There are 67 countries now. And we have also the Czech website, Worlds of Journalism CZ. And I will show you some data about the Czech journalists, as well as the maps that are comparing the situation in the Czech Republic and also some other foreign countries. I don't think this is the most necessary information for you, how we were doing the sample of the Czech journalists, but here are a couple of things that maybe you could find interesting. Czech journalists are quite young. The average age of sample journalists was 35.6 68 years, and also they have on average 10.79 years of professional experience as working as journalists, and they also need to do quite a lot of topics. They need to work on quite a lot of topics. They are in 80.8% of cases. They were generalists. Only 19.2% of them had the luxury to concentrate only on the specific beat. When you combine it with the very low age and also quite short experience, years of experience, then it can cause problems, especially when you are covering the big issues and the political issues, because you don't know the context, and also you can be in trouble because you don't have enough time to pursue your topic. And what is interesting, when you are thinking of trade unions, only 7.3% of people who were within our sample of 291 people who were working as news journalists were members of a professional journalists organization. So the tradition of organizing here for journalists is, in the democratic regime, is quite low. Here I have a couple of maps where you can compare Czech journalists and their perceived influences with the rest of the world. The first one is the perceived political influence in journalism. As you can see, journalists perceived it as quite low in the Czech Republic, and it is something we have in common with a lot of democratic countries. On the other hand, of course, there is China with the highest perceived political influence, and of course some African countries and so on. The journalistic trust in political countries, in political institutions, is on the other hand very low. It's one of the lowest in the world, the perceived influence, of course, because it's something journalists say they don't believe in. And you can see that it is quite interesting from the map that it is something we have in common with the Balkan countries and also the Brazil, those former authoritarian and totalitarian countries. And the economic influence in journalism is, according to Czech journalists, quite low, as you can see, but we don't know if it still could be valid also in 2017, maybe not. The data are from 2012 till 2014, maybe it would be different now. On the other hand, as you can see, it is very important for the Czech journalists, the organizational influences, and also they have quite strong editorial autonomy in the newsroom, just the medium, but it's not so bad when you compare it with other countries from the region. And there are quite high procedural influences in journalism, as information access, as journalism ethics, media laws and regulations. They are quite important for the Czech journalists. So maybe we can talk more about it then. And what is interesting and can be compared with the ideals of objective journalism and the state on the arm length from the journalism, you can see that Czech journalists don't want to play the collaborative role for the government. They don't want to cooperate, convey a positive image of political leaders and so on. And on the other hand, they also don't want to motivate people to participate in politics or monitor and scrutinize business. It's not the topic. It's not the topic for them. And the populist role to produce some entertaining things is also quite low in the Czech Republic, according to the journalist's opinion. So I hope that there is also some kind of practical context for those things and ideals that were mentioned before. And I would be really happy if we could start the discussion also with Jan Lopatka and ERIK Best about Czech journalism and the comparison of the Czech journalism and the foreign one. Maybe it would be interesting to say, if you find Czech journalism somehow exceptional maybe within the region, maybe within the Europe, or is it just the normal journalism, normal media as they are anywhere else?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I have to apologize for my attire, but I couldn't fit into a normal shirt, despite trying after receiving this cast earlier today. And I'm a walking conflict of interest because the sign on the shirt is for a pub that I own with my friends. So it was not intentional. I'm sorry for it, but I felt I had to declare it to be fair and honest. Well, my experience is limited because I've worked with Reuters for over 20 years, but I've been based in Prague. I work on a daily basis with colleagues in London and in our region, in Poland. We're responsible for Slovakia. We have people there, or one person at the moment, and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. So what I can say about the Czech media scene within the context of the region is that we are doing quite well in terms of media independence. But that is a relatively recent phenomenon. When I make this comparison, I mean recent years, because what we have seen in Poland and in Hungary is a certain deterioration of the media space, and the steps taken by governments there. Some of them have been mentioned. Certainly are not helping. Before then, I would think that, for example, in Poland, the media scene, especially the private media scene, is much more vibrant. It has a lot to do with Poland being a much bigger market, which can support much wider and deeper media scene than we have. In contrast, when we talk about Slovakia, for example, I would think it would be a little on the other side than Poland when we compare it. But what has been going on in the past 15 months or so puts the Czech media scene in a slightly better light, which doesn't mean it's perfect in many ways, and we can discuss that in detail. I just wanted to make a very quick introduction and pass the word to Erik. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good evening. It's quite a luxury for me to speak English. I've almost forgotten it. Well, it was interesting for me to hear from MOGENS that independent journalism is so important, because I think the situation is that everyone says he wants independent journalism, but in fact almost no one wants it. Almost no one actually wants independent journalism. And because of that, most people are happy with the journalism in the Czech Republic, because I don't find it particularly independent. And when I say no one wants it, what do I mean by that? Well, politicians certainly do not want independent journalism. Why would they? They want the journalism to promote their own ideas. Good evening. They want to control journalism. And of course in Poland it's much more topical, and it's a very easy thing for everyone to understand when someone is removed. But in the Czech Republic, we've basically been nominating and appointing people to the boards of the broadcast councils in the same way for years, and that doesn't seem to bother really anyone in the West. But it's very similar. Politicians do not want independent journalism. Businesses do not want independent journalism, for the most part. Of course, there are exceptions. But businesses want you to write what is favorable to them. They want you to be a PR machine for the business. Then you have politicians that are outside of government. It's the same. They're trying to get into government, so they want to use the media to increase their power. And then we have the readers. Well, every reader says he wants independent media, but does anyone really know who owns the media they read? Does anyone really pay attention? Does anyone really study the interests that are behind the owners What are the owners trying to achieve? Do we know now so much of the media is being fed to us through Twitter and through Facebook? Do we know who the owners of them are? Well, we know some names, but do we know who is financing them? Do we know what their interests are, what they're trying to achieve? So I think it all sounds very nice, but in the end, not even most journalists want independent media. Now, if they're working for someone, they do want independence. They do want to be able to write without someone telling them what to do. But in the Czech Republic, we have all these new independent small media outlets, such as mine, such as Echo 24, Forum 24, all kinds of things popping up. And even among those, very often, I don't mean specifically in the Czech Republic, but very often, even the independent media does not want to remain independent because it's not very profitable to be independent. It's better to be part of some bigger organization with someone else paying the bills. And it's almost impossible, I think, to hold a discussion about journalism in the Czech Republic and the world without talking about the publishers. Perhaps we should be talking about the fate of publishing, the fate of the publishers, because especially with the consolidation of the media in the past few years, I know it's controversial to say, but it's like if I asked you, raise your hand if your mother or father was in the Communist Party. Well, you would all think that's none of your business. Why are you asking me that? Well, maybe in 20 years when your children are sitting here instead of you, someone will ask, raise your hand if your parents worked for one of the oligarchs who owned the Czech media. And they might be just as embarrassed to raise their hand as you are now to raise your hand if your parents were in the Communist Party. And that's kind of the way I see it. The takeover of business interests of the media is nearing completion, and often we don't recognize it, and if we do recognize it, often we don't care. That's independent media.
And do you think it was really interesting since the kind of fight and also a kind of very straight and very aggressive tactics against the media owned by the oligarchs are visible within the society and within the journalism environment. Do you think it's really the issue? Is it something like being in the Communist Party?
Well, I don't. Of course, it's not that bad. I don't think it's that bad. But we are moving in a certain direction. I think Jan is in an ideal position because he works for a big Western independent. He can stand apart from it somewhat. Well, take a look at Mladá Fronta today. Did anyone open Mladá Fronta? One of the big stories is Jaroslav Faltýnek. He's now being called the Crown Prince of Ano. The Crown Prince of Ano. Oh, sorry, I messed it up. Huh. Sorry, it's the opposite. He's no longer the Crown Prince. It's the mayor of Brno. What is his name? Petr? Yeah, I can never remember his last name. He is now the Crown Prince. I apologize, I got that mixed up. What they're doing is they're moving Faltýnek out and they're moving this new guy in. And I will almost bet you today that in 1 month, Faltýnek will no longer be the first vice chairman of ANO. Whereas a week ago, no one would have thought that was possible. Yet today, Mladá Fronta, owned by the chairman of the party, put out the news that Babiš considers the Brno mayor to be the new crown prince. And this is in play, and this is the way the media are working. Often we don't even realize what is going on. But I almost guarantee you that in a month, Jaroslav Faltýnek's position in ANO will be extremely reduced.
Okay, is it the topic also for the international journalism associations and federations, something that is happening here in the Czech Republic with the concentration of the media ownership? Is it something that crossed the border?
Definitely, we are interested in how the ownership is and the concentration of ownership. And regarding, I think I'm not that familiar with the situation in Czech Republic. It's a politician that getting that
Yes.
in charge of that media.
Yes, our finance minister.
The finance minister. That's what I yes, and of course this is something which is which it doesn't. Should be this should not be a part of a media. We had a situation 13, 14 years ago in Italy when Berlusconi came into power. Actually, the European Federation of Journalists at that time, and I participated in that, we made a mission, a fact-finding mission to Italy. It was at that time when we made fact-finding missions. It was to China. It was to some countries in America. It was not in Europe, but we decided to make a fact-finding mission to Italy because this was really problematic. What we saw in Italy, a concentration on Berlusconi and his brother. He could always say, "No, this is not me," but it was his brother. So it was the family dynasty taking care of the most important media in Italy. So it was, and we sent a report to the European Commission about this. They actually asked us for it. That's also why we have been involved in cases. And what you are telling here should actually be highlighted and alerted. We should find a way to alert that to the Council of Europe, because this sort of influence is actually violating of independent journalism. I understand I get your point that it's independent journalism is difficult, and where do we really see independent journalism? But that doesn't mean that we should not fight for independent journalism, because it is so crucial and so important. And I think that we the publishers and journalists, this is one of the topics where we could work together, and where we should work together. And I have experienced that we do that in some countries, working together on this, and we actually do it at the European level as well. We are sitting together at the Council of Europe on topics like this, advising the Council of Europe on their statements and what they should do on issues like this. I'll take the advantage also to tell you about the alert platform. There's a special platform at Council of Europe for safety of journalists and media freedom. On this platform, we are 8 NGOs in Europe who have the right directly to address violation on journalism, on journalism and violation on the safety of journalists. And when we do this, then the Council of Europe has the duty to ask the state and ask for explanation on what has happened. During the last 2 years, the first 2 years of this platform, we have put in 270 alerts around Europe on violation on journalism. I should have figured out if we have got something from Czech Republic also, but it may be that there is something that we should have a look at from Czech Republic. When this happens, then the Council of Europe will ask your government for an answer, and that could be useful for you, and that's the way you can use also an organization, your union here, you are as a journalist society, journalist association, what do I know, to highlight this and to ask the government, what did you answer the Council of Europe? You can find it on the website, because everything is transparent, but you could also highlight it here in this country. It has an impact. You say most of the countries, they will just they will tell you, no, this is not problematic in our countries. You have missed. There's some mistakes in this. We know the way they are answering this, but no country wants to be put on the top of the list at the alert platform. So it matters that we have that platform. This is something you can help us with. Tell your organization or tell the European Federation directly if journalism and safety of journalists is violated here in your country.
Maybe there is some of you who would like to pose the questions, because I suppose you come here to ask our guests for something. Raise your hand, please, if you have any question. Yeah, second row.
Hello, my name is Martina. I study journalism here at Charles University, and I just wonder, I would like to ask Mr. Best, you told us how it's a problem that oligarchs own media, but it's because they may have financial issues. So what do you think are the other options of financing media houses?
Well, that's of course a very difficult question. We're in an environment where the options are basically, and I think MOGENS could then tell us how they do it in Denmark, because that is an option that we don't have here yet. But where we have a financial owner or a business owner who uses the platform to benefit, which is basically what we have here. The one question in terms of the main media is where Seznam and Bravo fit into that. It's not really clear at the moment. Of the main media, the most independent appears to be Bravo and Seznam, and they're not the same thing, but they're very closely related. And I know for a lot of Czechs that sounds horrible, because Rude Pravo, no one wants to read Rude Pravo, but in fact Pravo is I think by far right now the best overall newspaper. An option also is to have some kind of foundation, the way the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung does it, where it's owned by a foundation that is overseen by an independent board. It is funded by a transparent means. Then you have also some kind of state support, and I think that's what we don't really have here, except there is some of that, I think, for the minority media. But the difficult thing in a small market is finding a business model that works. And my business has been working now for 25 years, and the business model worked fairly well for a small business for about 20 years. But in this new environment, even the kind of model I have, which is kind of the Financial Times model, which means a small number of readers but a fairly large price as opposed to mass. The other model is mass printing to a lot of readers. We're trying to serve a small number but at a fairly high price. But it gets more and more difficult because the oligarchs really do not like independent media, and they take steps to make it more difficult to exist. So some kind of foundation, or perhaps MOGENS could say something about the way it works in Denmark.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
I mean, with the 35%.
Yes, I shall tell about that. First, I would say that in small countries as Czech Republic, Denmark, Sweden, Hungary, it is difficult to have the pluralism that we actually want to have. It was easier before when the print media had a better possibility to survive. But after the online media really have increased, it is more problematic, and that's what we see all over the world. We had in Denmark before 2014, we had a system where the newspaper they were contributed to distribution of newspapers. We could see that this was not sustainable for the future because we will get fewer newspapers. So the support for distribution would simply be lower as when the year will come in 10-20 years. This support system will maybe disappear. So we had to keep it at the level that it was at. So we developed a new support system which was introduced by the government in 2014, and it's a fixed amount of 60 million euro per year, and this support media in a way so they got support according to how the staff cost is. In fact, how many journalists you have in your media. And you get up to 35%. I think it's 35% you can get in support for a journalist when you hire a journalist. So when you hire more journalists, you will get more support. But of course, there is a ceiling. You cannot just go up and up and up. So there's a ceiling, and we have the total amount of 60 million euros. So if you have to divide that between all the different media, and it's not only. And this is what's the one of the ideas. It should not only be for print media but also for online media. So the print media that had to develop new online media, suddenly they also could get support for the online media. So they could develop good journalism also online. So this is the way to ensure pluralism. And the ceiling is in the way, so it's per title. That means if a newspaper buy another newspaper, they have an interest in keep this newspaper as an independent newspaper, an independent title. Because if they don't do that, they'll lose the support. And we have seen this. We have seen this in practice that some newspapers actually have survived because of that. So we have managed to keep more pluralism that we would have kept if we haven't had this system. So there is possibilities to make it, and it's only about it's objective. So that means it's not which newspaper or which online media is good or bad. It's if they have more than 50% editorial content, then they are obliged to ask for that sort of support. There's a minor amount of money also for development and for establish new media. So you can actually support, apply for some special accounts to that. But it's a minor thing. But and again here, actually, it has provided some media to try to start new media. So there are some possibilities, but you need to be very sure that you keep the arm's length principle, because the state has no right to interfere in the newsroom, neither the private media nor the public service media.
Another question?
If I may just add to this, this is obviously going to go in different directions, as it already does. Various media houses have taken different strategy about pricing, about the paywalls. I like the idea. It was called PNO. It worked in Slovakia, Poland, and some other places, where you paid a monthly subscription of about 20 euros, but for that you got a combination of a number of media titles. So you would pay for a basket of newspapers, and the revenue was distributed according to clicks and how much time you spent on the individual pages. But that's not gone too well. And it's gonna, ERIK mentioned foundations. I think there's one way to go. I've seen more and more initiatives to fund independent, especially investigative journalism in electronic form only, obviously no print, funded by various foundations, international bodies as well. It can work in combination with subscription, with a subscription model, because in the end, people are gonna have to pay for the content or it won't exist. And it's simple as that. How we got here is obviously there were two cycles or two things that happened at the same time. One is the technological change, which was compounded in a big way by the huge economic crisis in 2008 and 9, which destroyed advertising. And it didn't change the trend, but it probably accelerated it a lot. And we've seen it, you could have seen it in foreign media covering the Czech Republic. For most foreign media no longer have a correspondent in the Czech Republic. This country used to have a guy from the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal had a bureau here, the Dow Jones Newswires had a bureau. These people are all gone. The Economist used to have a full-time correspondent some years ago. Most of these people are gone. So there's many fewer foreign media permanently represented here. We are here, and Bloomberg is here, AFP is here. Those are agencies. And then you have a bunch of correspondents from neighboring countries and big agencies like the German DPA and so on. So there have been huge cutbacks across the board. As this happened, Reuters is subscription-based. We don't carry any advertising, but it's a very expensive service. If you want the Reuters terminal at home, you will pay 1,600 euros a month, something like that. So this is a service basically for the financial community. But obviously, Reuters has been hit by the technological change as well, big time, because a lot of news that we used to provide almost exclusively is freely available real time on the internet, such as financial data, economic data, and so on. So Reuters is continuously adopting its business model as well, but there's that includes staff cuts in places that don't see that much news, and investments in places like Asia especially that are growing. But it has a silver lining, which is that Reuters are now investing more into longer form journalism, and they are hiring people, and the management is refocusing partially on having longer stories that will help differentiate our content from the commodity type news that is increasingly available for free everywhere. So there's different directions.
And can I just ask, what are the most interesting topics for Reuters from the Czech Republic, from the region? Political ones, economical ones?
This is a fairly stable country that, thank God, has no wars and uprisings and so on. So most of the content that we produce here is tailored for the financial community and for the people you see working in banks and asset management houses and so on, because those are people who are willing to pay a lot of money to get information quickly. So most of the stories that we write from here you will not see in newspapers or on our website. Some will, but it's a minority of our output at the moment.
Hi, I'm Cécile, a journalism student from France, and my question just follow what you said, Mr. Lopatka. Don't you think there's also some problem with media consumers? Because today everyone think, why should I pay a newspaper if I can get so many information for free on internet, social media, and so on? So do you think there's maybe something to do about media education to people? Because I remember my high school, before my studies and everything, I never got any idea in class or at school of what was media independence, importance of media. It was just my own opinion. So should we do something about media education?
Mr. Lopatka and then Mogens.
Yeah, this is a very, very important question. I think that we as journalists should be much more aware of media literacy than we are. Media literacy is a topic that is discussed in many universities, but not so much among journalists. We should be much more aware of that, because this is one of the answers of the very difficult question that you ask. It is not easy to answer that question, but one of the ways is to be active in the field of media literacy. And another thing that comes up here is that we see new editors in the media today. Editors which are who are more dangerous than what we have seen in many editors are not saying editors are dangerous, but these editors are dangerous. This is the algorithm editors that we see. They are taking over the power of media. If we don't take care of media literacy, for instance, or we don't address this, what happens with Facebook and other social media, Google, etc. Algorithm is taken over as responsible, non-responsible editors.
Jan Lopatka.
Thanks for the question. You're right in one way, which is that the media scene is very different than it was a generation ago, and it's much less, it's much more complex, much more diverse. So before you could tell how that a story that got to the people was processed from reporters through editors, and the whole process. So there was some, many people were involved, and there was some control over what gets out. Right now on the internet, anybody can set up a website and start spreading whatever. And so before, to actually tell people something, some dangerous hoaxes, it took a larger conspiracy to deliver it to the public than it does now. So it would be great if people learned how to work with information and how to work with sources right from the school age, probably. But my experience is that even we as journalists have problem working with sources quite often, so I wouldn't have hopes very high that schools can deliver that. It would be good to go in that direction, obviously. Same way like the central bank, for example, is trying to teach people some fundamental financial literacy, not to take a 2,000% loan the day of their first payday or whatever. Yes, we need to look at that. I mean, I'd say we, who are we? I don't know. I mean, it's a good idea to look at it. Do I have high hopes? No.
Can I ask Erik Best, because your motto, the motto of the fleet sheet is we separate the wheat from the chaff. So you need to work with sources. Is it hard to work with the Czech media as sources to separate the wheat from the chaff?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think the problem is that there is a lot of information, but I think there's a lot of good information available. I think my job is made somewhat easier because the competition is not always that great. So we sometimes pick out things that would be obvious to some journalists in different countries, but here seem to get passed up. Of course, we miss things as well. But I think it's interesting that you have two guests from the Czech Republic, and if you are journalism students, you might learn from this, because both of us are from media that are not typical in the sense that we are not mass targeted toward the masses. Now, we both have elements of our business that are, because that's the way the business of the media works. I make my money from a product that most of you have never even seen, although you may have seen my free product. The same with Jan. You might have seen stories by Reuters, but you probably have no idea how they actually make their money because you haven't seen one of the terminals. But this is where, if there is hope for the media, it's in publications or businesses of this model to an extent, because, and you might start thinking of this, how to take your skills or knowledge or enthusiasm for a certain skill. It doesn't have to be news. It could be sailing. It could be tennis. It could be computers. These are all fields where people are willing to pay for information. If it's good information, it has to be packaged well, targeted well, and money can be made. The problem with the mass media, it's right there in the definition. It's for the masses. The masses. The masses are the worst possible customers. They are. They are the worst. They have no loyalty whatsoever, and they're not willing to pay. Jan and I hate those kind of people. These are not our target audience. The objective now in media is to find someone who is willing to pay for what you're producing, and it's an extremely difficult thing to do. It's getting more and more difficult. Jan and Bloomberg are in a good position because they've been doing it for 20 or 30 or whatever years. But even there, they're seeing competition coming in. In my business as well, when I started, there was no similar publication anywhere in Central and Eastern Europe. And now, just in the Czech Republic, there's 3 or 4 of them. I can't even count exactly how many there are. Because they see that there might be an opportunity there to make money, and they think anyone can do it, so they jump in, and it reduces the pool because it's a small country. And if there is a lot of competition, that means that in the end, probably all of them will go out of business at some point.
Maybe it could be a good question for the audience. Are you willing to pay for the journalistic content?
Yeah, but at this point in their life, there might not even be any reason to pay for it.
Yeah, but because some of them are the students of journalism, I would be really interested if you would be willing to pay for the journalism content. Yeah, somebody else? Okay. Me, I would be willing to pay for the journalistic content. Okay. Okay, it's not so cool. Maybe the new generation will be more aware of the situation when they are out of school and in the business. Yeah. The next question from the audience. I saw some hand there. No. Maybe.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm just kind of piggybacking off of the sources and atypical outlets and that whole discussion. How does that jive with the dictum of politicians must stay out of the newsroom? Doesn't that kind of make it, outdated or irrelevant now that people, presidents have their own Twitter feeds and political parties can have their own blog and publish directly to the people? How does that, any or all of you?
Mogens?
Until we had Twitter, the politicians, of course, had the right to express their opinions. They could do it in chronicles. They made their views they could write letters to the newspapers. They could do something else. Nowadays, it's much easier to express yourself because we have so many media that we can do it. I think it's a public good, not only for politicians but for all the citizens. Many more have now the possibility to express their opinions today, including Trump. Some are clever to do that than others. Of course, all should have the chance to give their opinions. And that demands even more and better journalism, because we beside all that, we need journalism. We need journalism in print media, we need journalism in digital media, radio, TV. We need journalism on Facebook, on Twitter. We have a lot of journalists on Twitter, actually. It doesn't conflict with the idea that politicians should stay away from the newsrooms, because they should stay away from the newsrooms, editorial rooms where editors, journalists, they are composing the news of the day, or each hour, or running news, or whatever it is today. I don't think this conflict, there is a conflict with it. What I would like to also to highlight here is the need of press councils, and that was also actually an added-on answer to the former question, because this is also a way to ensure credibility of journalism. Press councils, we have got them in many countries now, where you can the complaints for wrong stories in the media. It's really important that these press councils are self-regulatory bodies. They should not be controlled by the state. They should not be introduced by the state. They should be introduced by journalists and editor in common, together with the citizens. Norway is actually one of the best examples of having such press councils. And digital media, and that is the answer of the question. Digital media should be a part of this as well. This is the way to have credibility of digital media. When you have so many media, just new website coming up, when they are a sort of a credibility is that they should be when they are a member of the press council, because then they have the duty to be a part of that system, of the self-regulatory system, of the ethical system, and to be correct and all that. I think that's important.
What's your opinion? Jan Lopatka?
Well, the good thing for us here is that Twitter is not very strong in the Czech Republic, so and not many people bother to follow many politicians on Twitter. I do follow some, and it's burdensome. But especially in some cases I have to, because if something happens I have to run actually a story of the Twitter statement quite often. And the Prime Minister or President or someone else says something outrageous. I would think that you are the politician in a newsroom. The typical conflict there is trading favors for access, and that's not changing. The typical problem for a journalist to retain his integrity is a politician. You come with a tough question, say we're going to run this about you. It's not very favorable to you. He says, "Don't run it. Hold on. I'll give you something much better tomorrow." And he may. So, and this is not changing. This still works, and everybody has to judge the situation. So the relationship between media and politicians, I haven't seen it changing in this country because of things like Twitter. Not yet. It may be the thing of the future, that the Czech population everybody will tune into Twitter and they will cut out the media, but it's not there yet. There's in the end, you know, I always tend to say this is a small country, so everybody knows everybody. That's true, but I think in the end, when you're the White House correspondent or the Pentagon correspondent, it would probably in the end be roughly the same in the States. In the end, it's about a small group of people, small group of advisors who have access to the politicians, and the dynamics, I think, would be quite similar, and the ethical considerations probably would be quite similar as well. What do you think?
But actually, I rely in American journalists. They will make the job tough for Mr. Trump. And we need really good journalism in the United States. And they have showed over the years that there are good journalism in the United States. So let's see. I'm convinced that we will see strong media doing a good job also in the United States. And I also want to emphasize that I'm very optimistic about the future. I can be so sad about what we have seen in many countries during the past years, and the rhetoric that we see, but when I talk to young journalists, and you should be among them as well, I have the hope and I trust that in the future that we will have good and strong media, and we will have pluralistic media in the future. There should be a lot of possibilities to have a lot of good jobs for you. I've just counted you. I think 10 of you will have to be innovative journalists in the future. There won't be normal jobs for you. Some of you will need to do something else. Think about that also, to be innovative in the future. We need innovative journalists, and we need media more than ever to control what happens now in Europe and in North America. We really need journalists to control, and we need well-educated journalists to control it. Because if we don't have that, then I would be very pessimistic. But as long as we have good and well-educated journalists, we have the hope for the future. So it's difficult nowadays to be optimistic, but I'm born optimistic and stay optimistic.
ERIK Best.
Back to the question of the politicians in the newsroom, we have in the Czech Republic, as you know, an unusual situation where the top media owner, Mr. Babiš, is also the most successful social media politician. He is also the second largest, or actually the owner of the largest conglomerate. He's not the richest man, but he has the largest conglomerate, which has its own security division. So we have a situation where one person controls various aspects of the media and also the kind of access that Jan was talking about, where we now have not only journalists who are having to defer to this person as the boss or as the finance minister, but you also have other politicians who now apparently are fearful of going after him because of the power he could use to go back at them. So we have, if you have been reading Echo 24, they have a very good series now about Mr. Babiš's income and whether he had enough income to buy some tax-free bonds from Agrofert. And Lenka Zlámalová has been doing a very good job. Bělobrádek has said something about it, but CSSD has not touched, as far as I know, has not touched the issue. And you have to wonder why, when this is such a beautiful political issue in the United States, my goodness, everyone would be writing about this. I imagine some of you don't even know what I'm talking about, but in the United States this would be a huge scandal. The idea that a politician did not have enough income to buy a financial instrument, yet the Social Democrats have been basically silent. And the only thing I can figure is that they are afraid that Mr. Babiš would come back at them with something that would hurt them. So we have not only the media scene being suppressed, but also the political scene being suppressed by one and the same person. And this is something that could have tremendous impact in the elections that are coming up, either because it explodes. I could see it exploding and Mr. Babiš being run out of politics. I don't think that's the likely scenario, but it's theoretically possible, and I don't think we can completely rule it out. More likely is, of course, it will continue like this and he'll win the elections. But it could end up, for whatever reason, backfiring and having the opposite effect of what it is now.
If I may just add my bit to this, we always try to illustrate stories to make them interesting to our readers abroad. We always try to make comparisons. So we're always trying to find a comparison for Mr. Babiš. So Berlusconi is one, of course. Donald Trump as a businessman is one, of course. But you would have to combine both and amplify them by a factor of 10 to actually illustrate how big Babiš is of a businessman related to the country and the society. He is, and we say this in our stories, he is the biggest private employer in the country. He has over 30,000 employees at over 250 companies, and he runs probably the most powerful ministry, which also includes the tax service, which would be in charge of looking into his taxable income. In the United States, the equivalent of that would be if the president owned the Boeing company, Apple Computer, and ExxonMobil together, probably. So, and in Italy, Silvio Berlusconi owned powerful media businesses, but they were just in the media. They did not have other, or not that I'm aware of. He did not own chemical factories that, basically feed off the country's oil refining capacity and so on. Mr. Babiš is a special case, and he should be treated as that. And he's not just an oligarch who bought some media. Right? It is also notable that after he bought Mafra, the publishing house, the year after, the company took about 30 million euro charge against its assets, a loss. So the business proposition of owning this is somewhat misty, because he bought something that a year later made him a big loss. So it's one thing to look at as well. And just in general about media ownership by businessmen, a lot of the Czech media was owned by mid-sized German or mid-sized Swiss publishing houses for years. And I remember in the 90s this was a political issue, but because you had German-speaking owners of Czech media, what does this mean for our relations in Germany? And the Sudetengerman issue was quite alive at the time, and so on. But to my best knowledge, there was no editorial influence from the owners, who eventually departed because of the state of the media scene. And then you got Mr. Babiš and Penta and others moving in from other business sector to add bits of media to their empire, and some of them even openly, publicly said they are buying a media house to defend themselves.
Yes, it's
one
the
Czech businessman,
purchase, yeah.
one Czech businessman openly in a newspaper interview said, "This is going to be my nuclear suitcase. If somebody moves against me, I will use my media to fight back." So it's not a pretty situation. And these are not normal businesses, because normally owning media is a business proposition, and you have a lot of private businesses like Göringer, Axel Springer, and so on, that used to be active here. They're no longer, the people who own large swathes of media have other business interests. And this is what obviously, even if they do not interfere with the editorial content at all, it is inherently a problem, because it hurts the trustworthiness of the media right from the beginning. And people don't need to be censored by their bosses or owners or editors-in-chiefs, but they will probably have a degree of self-censorship, I can imagine. Is it worth for me to go for this story or not? It may not be a good story, it may be a good story. If it's a good story, it's going to bring me into trouble. Why don't I go after a different story? And running a media owned by someone, it doesn't mean that it runs lies. It just runs scandals about the opposing party or the opposing business sector or a company and so on. And it may all be completely correct. It may be true. But it only goes in one direction. And this is, I think, what may be traceable in some Czech media, and I will not make any concrete allegations here.
We are discussing this issue of media ownership for quite a long time, since Babiš bought Mafra and all the stuff. But on the other hand, it is also true what Erik Best said at the beginning. Who cares from readers about the media ownership? How to raise the awareness among people? Of course, there is media literacy. Yes, it is. But how to raise the awareness to the media ownership issue? Do people really care if there is any kind of the cross-interest and all the stuff? How to raise their awareness? The normal audience, not students of journalism or journalists themselves. It's tough. It's a tough question, I know.
It is a real tough question, because what we have seen during the last 4 or 5 years in particular, we have seen some of the populists, leaders of the world hijacking the citizens in some way. Let me put it that way. And we haven't been smart enough to reach out to the citizens. And it's right, the media literacy this is not the only answer. It's a part of the answer, but it's not the answer in total. We need to find ways, and if I could tell you exactly how we could do this, I wouldn't be here. I would be somewhere else. But we have in common to find out how do we reach out and get the citizens back from those who have in reality have hijacked them. And this is what we have seen when Trump has succeeded in hijacking citizens, when you have seen what happens around the Brexit, what we are going to see now, we don't know, in France in the coming months. We see it all over Europe. So it's a very good and tough question, and we have to not only media, human rights organizations, politicians. We have to rely on that politicians could be able to do this. Although we have troubles there as well, because what happens in the political system just now. So it's it's a tough question. We need a lot of work and reflection to find out exactly how we can address this. Yeah, that was another thing, but I'll come back to that.
The media situation, not just in the Czech Republic, but in other countries as well, is also connected to what in general is happening in societies. You noticed last week that Oxfam said that now 8 people own as much as half the world's population. And this consolidation of wealth has been accelerating since, well, we could go back even further, but definitely since the crisis of 2008. And part of it is the policy of the central banks with quantitative easing. In the Czech Republic, it's the devaluation, and it's concentrating the wealth. And at the same time, the wealthy people see the unrest on the street. They see the people getting angry, voting for people like Mr. Trump, and they become fearful of their own existence. And one way to respond to that is to control the media. And that is one of the reasons we see in the Czech Republic what we see. And I think that is probably one of the main reasons Mr. Babiš went into politics, was to protect himself in this time of turbulence that he saw coming. And he wanted to be, and he is there, basically, he's achieved it. He wanted to be one of those deciding what is going to happen, as opposed to being subjected to those who would be deciding. And this is taking place in other countries as well, where there was a very well-known article in the United States, I can't remember who wrote it, but a kind of a middle-level rich person, just a billionaire or, you know, a few hundred millions or something like that, dollars. Not a super rich person, just a normal rich guy who made some money selling a company or whatever. And he wrote an article saying, the pitchforks are coming. The pitchforks, vidle, the pitchforks, the people are going to take their pitchforks and come and get the rich people. And control of the media is one way to try to influence that. And at the same time, we see the large companies influencing the way our schools operate. Look at the companies that are trying to get us using tablet computers. Well, they're all the American companies that basically also, American or British, that also have such an influence over the media. How can we expect someone at age 18 or 20 to be able to make a decision about analyzing the media when that person at age 3 is given a tablet computer and told that he doesn't need to think anymore and doesn't need to read because the tablet will tell him everything? To me as a parent, it's absolutely absurd, and my biggest obstacle as a parent is keeping the computer out of the hands of the children, not getting it into the hands, which is what Microsoft wants to do. But this is the trend, so it's absolutely unthinkable for us to now have any kind of positive effect on the way the people are thinking when this trend towards using the computer and the telephone for absolutely everything and forgetting how to think and read is so prevalent, so strong. And it's a trend that is going to continue. And of course, it's nice to theoretically think about how to put an end to it, but really we can only do it as a parent. That's the only way we can really have any influence, is as a parent.
Since we are quite near to the end of the discussion, there is the space for one more question from the audience. If not, I have one. I would like to ask you what are the big challenges and also opportunities for the journalism in 2017, both on the international level and on the Czech level? It's a kind of prediction, you know.
Well, I'll start. I think the challenge, and I'm not sure everyone takes it as a challenge, but I think the challenge is to maintain objectivity at a time when pressure is being put on us from all sides to not be objective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a tough one. I should say something lighter. I think journalism is a lot of fun, right? It gives you access to stories, and you learn so much by having to study and research for stories that, you know, it can be exciting even after 23 years in my case, or maybe I'm just you know, easy to excite. No, but the challenge is to not bend to the pressures that Erik's talking about, to find a way how to get your thoughts into stories and how to get them across. For me, the challenge is to get them through my editor in London, which if he doesn't like it, he says, "Why do I care?" That's the most common question he has. And he is right, because before you start working on a story, try to put yourself into the position of the reader and say, why do I care? Why should I read this? Why should I spend my 3 minutes on this instead of reading stuff on Facebook? That's a challenge. I had one thing in mind, a challenge. It's an intellectual challenge to each of you as well, not to do it in a lazy way, because when I look at a lot of the ways that especially Czech television crews do news, it's just like, this was one message I wanted to get across to us. If a politician says something, a lot of Czech television news, and I'm not picking up a single station, the way they cover it most of the time is they go around 5 opposition guys and I'll say, what do you think about that? Instead of challenging the statement. So it's just one line I wanted to say before before the end. It's an internal intellectual challenge for you to find out, to keep challenging the people who tell you, who give you information, the way you process it, the way you question it, the way you challenge it, and if you end up with something, you give it to your editor, you will say, why do I care? So you'll go back, you'll improve it again, and in the end of the day, and you have a good story, you go home feeling I've done some good work today, and I've learned something. So despite the gloomy media environment, it's still fun at a lot of places. There are new platforms you can work for. Some of them were mentioned today. So yeah, go for it and have fun.
The last topic you talked about, this is not something particular in Czech Republic. This is something you see in many places. So, and this is why it's so important to have well-educated journalists and not fall for doing the job, as you said, that we see, unfortunately, many places. If I should say something about the challenge, I agree on what you have said, but I'll try to say something differently. The big challenge today is to find the balance between what I call the 4 pillars of the media market. We've got public service media. Public service media is crucial for all of us, and we have to find a way that they can survive in the future and survive as independent public service media. We have private media that also should survive side by side with the public service media, and they should stop fighting. Have this battlefield between each other, because there's another battlefield which is much more important that they could stick together on. And this is the 3rd pillar that also should be there, and that we should find the right form, the right format in that balance. And this is the digital media coming from California and Ireland and Oregon. You know them all. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Disney, you name them. This is, in my view, the third pillar. Netflix is among them as well. And the fourth pillar is, that will be some of you, that, as I said before, the innovative youngsters, I used to call them that, because you will find new ways, which is incredibly important for all media to be able to develop. These four pillars should be able to live in a sort of harmony. Even it sounds maybe difficult, but if the media, these four media pillars can live in a harmony, I think we will have a good future for media. This is one of the biggest challenges I see. You said opportunities. Journalists today have never had so many opportunities to research, to make stories, and to make good stories as you have today. What is the obstacle is that you don't have the time to do it, that you don't have the working conditions to be able to do it. This is the challenge, but you have so many opportunities today. It's so fantastic what you have got opportunities, what you are able to do graphically, all the instruments you have got in your work. If we have had that when I was at the journalism high school, it would have been fantastic. Finally, I want you to write down carefully what you have said about this finance minister, because I think we have something that should be reported to our alert platform. You should really do that. Please do it and send it to your affiliates or send it directly to the European Federation of Journalists, because we have the direct access to this platform. Please do it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all. Thank you. I would like to thank to our guests for coming, and also to you, since you were a great audience, and see you in February. Bye.